needs to feel sure that they've got, even though they sometimes turn out to be wrong. I'd moved to London and was working full-time at the TLS, and I wrote the book in the evenings when I got home from work and at weekends. There was a joy to it I have never exactly recaptured. It was a secret project. No one knew anything about it or had any expectations of it. It was a place I went to and messed around in, with a confidence and insouciance I would envy now. It was also a zone of license, where I enjoyed, through the adventures of its handsome and conceited young narrator, a far wilder and more successful sex life than I seemed to be managing for myself. I wrote the novel in a 1984 desk diary, setting out on January the 1st, determined to write a page each day, and falling quite badly behind by the end of April. It wasn't till 2.5 years later that I got to December the 31st, bringing the story to a close on the very last line. So the book had, from the moment it began, a reassuringly finite extent and shape, with 12 chapters, each finishing on the last line of a month. Perhaps the very fact of using a diary in this way suggests the commuting of something private and confessional, the normal matter of a journal, into the public form of a novel. Looking at it now for the first time in years, it seems to me like a tall chest of drawers into which I crammed almost everything that interested me. Not only gay social history of the 20th century, with contrasts between present-day hedonism and life lived under severer legal and social constraints, but colonialism, race relations, barriers and blindnesses of class, English architecture, Wagner, Britain, Shostakovich, pornography, photography, clubbing, swimming, of course, and libraries, and becoming a vegetarian. It was a public showing of a mass of personal things, and I felt that because what I was doing was going to startle people whom I knew, my parents among them, it had to be written with no regard whatever for what any particular person might think of it. I confess I had bad dreams in the month leading up to publication day, when this long-nursed secret would be declared. All novelists work differently, but to me that process of accumulated interests, of little subject areas slowly disclosing a need to be brought together, has been the modus operandi. It is one reason my books take quite a long time to come clear in my mind, before the also slow process of actually writing them. Each one still has the element that the first one had of a faced-down risk, but I've never quite recaptured the breezy confidence I felt 40 years ago, and the skill that comes with long practice is matched by a deepening capacity for doubt. Doubt, I think, healthy, at least in small doses. The 4 a.m. fear of failure is something worse, which has simply to be lived through. At its heart, perhaps, lies the recurrent question of going public with something private, not only a thought or a fantasy, but an evident belief that I find it interesting to make certain things happen. The fun of plotting the first novel was soon undercut by a feeling of discomfort with plot. In that book, the young narrator gains his access to experiences other than his own by reading a much older man's diary, quite a primitive device, with chunks of the diary dropped in at convenient and sometimes implausible moments. In my next book, The Folding Star, I fell short even of this trick, with the older man, a Flemish art historian, simply telling his explanatory story to the young narrator shortly before the end of the novel. Again, the intergenerational thing was key, but the fictional mechanism I used to explore it was crude. When The Folding Star was published, my friend Lawrence Norfolk said various appreciative and gratifying things to me about it, but it was his final remark that struck home. Yeah, that's all lovely, but why do your books have to have these terrible plots? It touched on my own worry that plot was too easily a form of sadism, a gleeful doling out of reward and above all of punishment, a relished demonstration that I was in control, and like Hardy's President of the Immortals, pulling the strings. It seems somehow connected too with a model of the novel as a puzzle, one in which a great secret is hidden, which when finally revealed explains everything that's gone before. This already seemed to me quite unsatisfactory as a rendering of real life, and a first result of Lawrence's remark was my short third novel, The Spell, a book in which things necessarily happen, but in which I tried to replace plot by design. Much of the book is set in Hardy country, some in the world of London gay bars and clubs, and the narrative point of view is passed in a strict pattern between four gay men of different ages in a complex dance of relationships. As a middle-aged man, I found I didn't really care much for plot at all. Things change, and at any moment, things are how they are. That was now what I wanted to capture. In the books I wrote after The Line of Beauty, I set out to reproduce that feeling of being alive at moments in the 20th and 21st centuries, with no sense of an explanatory retrospect and a proper human ignorance of what the future holds. I felt I'd hit on an original way of doing this by inventing an episodic structure. A weekend might be described in detail for 100 pages, then we would jump to a new section, set perhaps 20 years later, where the reader would struggle for a minute to work out what the hell was going on. Some characters would not have survived. Others might at first be barely recognizable in their new circumstances. The germ of the idea was the mysterious time gap in the Portrait of a Lady, where Henry James leaps over the early period of Isabel Archer's marriage to Gilbert Osmond and the birth and death of her child. And I'd used it on a small three-year scale in The Line of Beauty to dramatize the surprises and ironies of Nick Guest's love life and his absorption into the corrosive milieu of high Thatcherism. But the structure of The Strangest Child, jumping in 5 widely spaced sections from 1913 to 2008, seemed to me my own invention. Until, that is, I reread Lampedusa's The Leopard for the first time in 40 years and found that he'd used exactly the same procedure. I almost felt for a bewildered moment that Lampedusa must have pinched the idea from me. But no, The Leopard was published when I was 4. So I took it in, then, as a further instance of the benign and unconscious example. How amazing it is that certain things occurred. How overwhelming when they happened. The crisis, the love affair, the death. And already, how long ago they were, and how terribly our sense of time speeds up and carries us away from them as we grow old. Now my 30-year-old self, beginning his first novel, is no longer quite knowable to me, and I have almost no idea as yet about what I'll write next. But I do see this astonishing prize for work done in the past as being also a mighty encouragement to carry on. And in both respects, I'm profoundly grateful for it. Thank you.
We will all be looking forward to what comes next, Alan. Thank you. Thank you for that. So we've got this very special moment now where Alan gets to award the Clarissa Luard Award to a writer of his choosing. This award is named in honour of an Arts Council literature officer called Clarissa Luard, who I was lucky enough to work with earlier in my career. She was a real friend to literature and to the small publishers and literary projects that she supported. So it's fantastic to have this award in her name, which keeps the spirit of the kind of family of literature moving in the world. So I'm now going to hand back to Alan to tell you who he's going to give the award to.
I remember Clarissa very fondly, too, from a long ago arts panel that I sat on, so it's doubly nice to be giving this prize named in her honour. The writer I've selected made a powerful debut 4 years ago with Lava, a witty, angry, and revelatory one-woman play in which she explored the workings of Western racism through the family history of a young woman who, like her, is British Congolese. I was lucky to see her second play, Shifters, when it opened at the Bush Theatre in the spring of 2024. It subsequently transferred to the West End. Written for 2 young black actors, a man and a woman, it shows a brilliant theatrical mind at work, a marvelous ear, and rich psychological insight. Shifters is hard to classify, a dazzlingly structured comedy in which expectations are frequently confounded and larger understandings and perspectives repeatedly revealed. It was the best new play I saw last year, and it made me extremely keen to see what she does next. It's wonderful to have this unexpected chance to praise her and encourage her. The Clarissa Luard Award goes to Benedict Lombay.
thank you, Alan. So I was specifically told that I didn't have to give a speech. And I now realize it was probably the organizers trying to protect me from having to follow on from you. So deeply regret not listening to you. That was a really beautiful introduction. And yeah, it's really wonderful to kind of get to stand here. I was told on Friday that Alan was the writer that nominated me. And we had never met, and I had never had the pleasure of experiencing his work. And so I spent a large part of my weekend furiously trying to get through as much of Alan's work as I possibly could, just so that I could say with my whole chest that you are an exquisite writer, and I am so honored to be recognized by such an extraordinary storyteller. So thank you. So writing is hard and lonely and honestly kind of insane. And the people with a front seat to this insanity, namely our partners and our agents, probably deserve awards of their own just for enduring and putting up with us. So shout out to my partner Patty and my agent Kat, who's here today. But this award, the Clarissa Luard Award, and I want to keep this short and sweet because I know you're all busy. But I think this award is a rare and precious thing. It's the force that adds a little more fuel to the fire of your imagination, the voice that tells you, keep going, you're on the right path, and then gives you money out of nowhere, like a fairy godmother. So in this age of uncertainty and arts funding cuts and constant existential doom, thank you to the Clarissa Luard Award, to the David Cohen Prize, to New Writing North, to Arts Council England, to Alan, for adding a little more fuel to my creative fire. It means more than you know, and long may you continue to do that for other writers. Thank you very much.
Somebody was going to have to say it's a doomy climate, weren't they? But I don't believe it is when we have nights like this and prizes like this and hope and talent in the room like we have this evening. None of this happens without money, and the John S Cohen Foundation is the supporter, the long-term supporter and the creator of this prize. So I'm now delighted to invite Imogen Cohen to the stage, who chairs the foundation, and she's going to tell us a little bit about how this whole thing came about. But please give her a massive round of applause, because prizes like this don't happen without people like Imogen.
Thank you, Claire. Can everyone hear me? Yes, good. First of all, many, many congratulations to Alan Hollinghurst and Benedict Lombe, and huge thanks to Hermione Lee, Chair of the Judges, and Tessa Hadley, Sean Hewitt, Maya Jaggi, and Ruth Scare, and of course to New Writing North for your enduring support. Now, my name is Imogen Cohen, you can see that. Those of you who have already attended this ceremony know that I always talk about my parents and their involvement with the prize. But this time around, I'd like to pay tribute to Alistair Niven, who sadly passed away in March. Alistair was a magnificent literary diplomat. He opened doors to diverse literary voices, and in doing so, helped to reshape many of our cultural institutions. And back in the 90s, when he was Director of Literature for the Arts Council of Great Britain, he also helped to shape the David Cohen Prize. Now, although he's no longer with us, he did leave us his memoir, which you can see there. So let's let Alistair tell us in his own words how this prize began. It arose from a chance remark which Peter Palumbo, chairman of the Arts Council of Great Britain, made in a newspaper article. Peter Palumbo was on confident ground with most of the arts, but when he was lobbed a question about what the council might be thinking of doing for literature, he did not so much as grasp at a straw as build a haystack. And the haystack was, we're going to run a prize bigger than Booker. 8:30 a.m. the next morning, Alistair's phone rings. It's P.D. James, crime writer, but more importantly for this story, chair of the Arts Council's literary panel. Am I suffering from Alzheimer's, she said. I see we're going to run a prize bigger than Booker. And I have no recollection of discussing this. Oh, I'd forget about it, said Alistair placatingly. Peter was probably just thinking on his feet. It'll go away. But as we all know, it didn't go away, because later that day, my dad, who hadn't read the newspaper article, happened to be in his car with the radio turned on, and Peter Palumbo came on air making the same bold claim. We're going to run a prize bigger than Booker. Let's let Alistair take up the story from here. The next afternoon, the phone rang again. A quiet voice said, I hear you're thinking of starting a prize for literature. I might be able to assist. It was David Cohen. He explained that he was a physician and had access to a family trust which supported the arts. He asked if the council might value some financial help from this source. With my colleague, Perdita Hunt, I went to meet David. We left that meeting with the shape of a new prize drawn up, a commitment to funding, and the genesis of friendship, which lasted until his death in 2019. Alistair was a really good friend to my father and a friend to the rest of the family as well. A year and a half after my mother died, and just a few weeks after my father died, he came to Amsterdam together with his wife Helen to hold my hand at my PhD defense. And he treated this prize with just as much love and care. Because this prize goes to established writers, Alistair knew that it was important for younger writers to benefit from it as well, which is why we go hand in hand with the Clarissa Luard Award. So is this prize bigger than Booker? Well, it's not as glitzy, and it certainly doesn't get as much publicity, but it has weight, a weight conferred on it by the incredible line of writers who have accepted this prize for their lifetime achievement. But before we toast our most recent winner, let's join Alistair one last time as he recounts phoning our very first winner to tell him the good news. I was able, by devious means, to discover Naipaul's private phone number. I was warned that he would be cross at an unsolicited call, but advised that if I could mention the cash value of the prize, he would stay on the line. I duly telephoned to be greeted by an irate demand, "Who gave you my number?" I talked over him to forestall him banging down the receiver. "You have won a prize worth £30,000. He paused. A long pause. Then his tone changed. I'm so sorry that I was brisk a moment ago. I have one of my migraines today. From that moment on, we were friends. Alistair was a friend to many of us. So thank you, Alistair, for holding my hand at my PhD defence. Thank you for your excellent telephone skills. And thank you for shaping this prize. And thank you, all of you, for coming. And please join us downstairs to raise a glass to Benedict Lombay, winner of the Clarissa Leward Award, and Alan Hollinghurst, winner of the 2025 David Cohen Prize.